This film documents the Vietnam War in the words of Americans who served there. It features home movies and rare archival footage collected during a worldwide search, and now presented in high definition. Many scenes are graphic in nature, and viewer discretion is advised.
World War II, fella, and I served 3 years. I know what it's about.
So I have a son that's going to go into the army.
We fight because we must fight. If we're to live in a world where every country can shape its own destiny, we will not be defeated.
In the spring of 1969, 4 years after the first ground combat troops landed in Da Nang, there are more than 500,000 U.S. troops in Vietnam. But the war that once garnered the vast majority of America's support has drastically changed. Years of growing frustration over a military strategy that focuses on enemy bodies instead of territory has caused public support to plummet. And for the first time, the American soldiers in Vietnam are feeling the effects of the anti-war movement at home. Having run on a campaign pledge of peace with honor, 6 months after taking office, President Nixon meets with South Vietnamese President Nguyen Van Thieu and announces his plan to end American involvement in Vietnam.
After 5 years in which more and more Americans have been sent to Vietnam, we finally have reached the point where we can begin to bring Americans home from Vietnam.
The U.S. military now begins the long and complicated process of withdrawing American troops and training the South Vietnamese to take over full combat responsibilities. The strategy is called Vietnamization.
And minds aren't here. They're back home, where most of us think we belong.
24-year-old Don DeVore is an artilleryman with the 1st Infantry Division, stationed at Firebase Gym, just north of Saigon. 9 months earlier, DeVore received his draft notice at the same time his wife found out she was pregnant.
Last fall, when my wife told me she was pregnant and I got my draft notice, I recall being violently
sick to my stomach. I mean, it was just an awful feeling. I had no desire to go into the service. I had no desire to probably have to go to Vietnam. We all really had the same mission. Let's get this over with.
Let's stay safe, and let's get back home to our families. Because we all know we're trying to get the hell out of here. And none of us wants to be the last guy to die for a lost cause. Vietnam.
Everyone's on edge. Bad enough that we're out here in the middle of this crap. Now on top of that, we've got these damn ARVN hanging over our shoulders.
Gary Benedetti is a 24-year-old coxswain in the Brown Water Navy. As part of the Vietnamization process, he and his fellow sailors are training the South Vietnamese to operate U.S. boats and weapons in the Mekong Delta. With over 3,000 miles of twisting rivers, streams, and canals, the Delta is a watery version of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, used by enemy soldiers to move men, weapons, and supplies into the South. It's also home to over half the population of South Vietnam, an estimated 8 million people, and produces nearly 70% of the country's rice, making it one of the most highly contested areas in South Vietnam.
We're supposed to teach these guys to take over for us. I mean, our Navy's been out on these rivers for years trying to stop the Viet Cong, and we're still having a hell of a time. If you ask me, from my perspective, and from the perspective of a lot of guys
I worked with on the rivers, it didn't seem to be that good of an idea. What it was is lack of knowledge of the boat. I mean, they're brought up in a rice paddies. They can shoot. You know, a farmer can shoot, but he can also fix a tractor. These guys didn't have tractors. They had water buffalo. So to put them
on a piece of machinery.
You
can't do it. Especially out here, in the middle of all this. I mean, the VC ambush us every chance they get. When that happens, it takes everything we got just to stop them. Forget about winning. It's gonna take everything they got just to survive.
Hello, Daddy. This is Debbie. How are you today? When you have time, will you...
Hello, Dad. This is David, and I'd just like to tell you a few things that happened. I don't have too many things to say.
I like to get them. That's what makes me want to write back. Okay? See ya. Goodbye.
Remember that I love you with all my heart. I miss you with all my heart. And I hope we never have to be separated again. Just hope that the war can be over. Take care. I love you.
Ann Purcell's husband, Ben, has been missing in action in Vietnam for 13 months, ever since the helicopter he was riding in was shot down. Since then, she and her 5 children have had no contact with him and no information as to whether or not he is still alive.
I haven't listened to Ben's tape since he went missing. It's far too painful. But he is still all I ever think about. Most mornings, it's a struggle to get out of bed. If it weren't for the children, I probably wouldn't even bother. So when the military
my assistant
liaison
officer called and said, "May I come out?" And I said, "Sure." And so he came out and handed me a little piece of paper, and it said, "Your husband's status is being changed from missing in action to POW because a Viet Cong soldier has been captured, and on him he had all the interrogation papers of the men that were aboard the helicopter."
As I run outside to tell the children, I'm suddenly overcome with the sheer, simple beauty of the day. It's as if I've spent the last year seeing the entire world through a dark gray veil. And now, finally, that gray is gone. Of course, I realize that none of this means Ben is still alive. A lot could have happened in the last 13 months. But still, I feel like I've finally got something to hold on to. I've got hope.
There's no words to describe this place, other than Woodstock is one weird, wild place. And I'm loving every minute of it.
Don DeVore's world has quickly changed. 3 days ago, he was in Vietnam. Now he's home on emergency leave because his wife went into early labor. She and the baby are fine, but his sleepy hometown has undergone quite a change.
I got
All the
on
roads
Route
around
17.
here were like
It was
a
a parking
parking
lot.
lot.
I thought perhaps there was an accident or something, but it was just so many cars there. I couldn't believe it. I turned on the radio, and they were reporting on Woodstock. So I called some friends
who lived nearby
in the area,
and they came over
and
said, let's go to Woodstock.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books, pick up a gun. I'm gonna have.
Other than being the only guy with short hair, I feel like I fit in here way better than I ever did in Vietnam.
Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next up is Vietnam.
It just didn't resonate with Vietnam. They're these two separate worlds, you know?
Well, ain't no time to
But as much as I try to push it out of my mind, I know none of this is gonna last.
So I man this war a go-go. There's
A couple of days when this leaves over, Woodstock, my family, and my brand new baby will all be a distant memory. Because I'll be back in Vietnam. Every day here is the same as it was before I left. We send out round after round for hours at a time, and then we sit back and wait, bored out of our minds, until it starts again.
After a week in the U.S., Don DeVore is back at Firebase Gym. He and his fellow soldiers have just learned that Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader of North Vietnam, has died.
They're saying we're supposed to have a ceasefire in honor of Ho's death, but we all learned from Tet that ceasefires don't mean shit. Our units in the field have been calling in for artillery support all day. I bet we fired at least 1,000 rounds in the last few hours.
Like all fire support bases, Firebase Gym provides artillery cover for American or South Vietnamese infantry units in the field. When these troops come under attack, they depend upon nearby fire bases for survival.
Come sunset, things die down. But we're still on full alert.
Not surprisingly, enemy forces launch the majority of their attacks at night, under the cover of dark. Fire bases, such as Gym, are considered primary targets. And since the bases are immobile, the VC have ample time to scope out any weaknesses.
We may own the day, but the North
Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, they owned the night. That was their time. I always felt that that's when the advantage went over to them, because then a lot of the modern weaponry and techniques that we had just didn't apply to the nighttime. And at night was when we were most aware that we were very vulnerable.
Some nearby bases got hit last night, so everyone's on edge. Me and 5 other guys are assigned to guard duty at the fire control bunker. Our orders are to radio in coordinates as soon as a target's spotted. Although, right now, I'm so tense I can barely talk. All of a sudden, I hear an explosion on top of the bunker.
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure what it was, but I could see a very nervous look on the faces of some of the others, and I heard somebody say it sounded like an RPG going off, a rocket-propelled grenade. All of a sudden, this terror just goes through everybody, you know. I heard somebody yell, "There are dinks in the wire." It exploded, I think, right next to my feet, and that's the one that hit me. And it literally picked me a couple of feet right up off the ground and slammed me back down. And then I could feel a lot of pain.
A lot of pain up and down the left side of my body. When I look over at my left arm, it's a mangled, bloody mess. It's the last thing I remember before blacking out.
By dawn, the attack on Firebase Gym is over. As usual, the enemy withdraws at first light, when American firepower is once again most effective.
When I open my eyes, a bunch of guys are cheering for me. Kind of like a football player who's been hurt on the field. He's now being carried off to the yells and screams of the crowd. And as we lift off, a calm starts to come over me. I can see out the side door that the morning sun is starting to set in. Kind of a purplish red sky. And all I can think to myself is, I'm alive. For me, this craziness is over.
In the fall of 1969, the anti-war movement is heating up. On October 15th, more than 1 million people across the country, in both small towns and large cities, participate in the Vietnam moratorium demonstrations.
It's the time of the season when love runs high. In this time, give it to me easy, and let me try with pleasured hands to take you in the sun.
Meanwhile, even though the total number of troops is starting to be reduced, the military still needs men to fill its ranks, and a draft to meet that need. For years, local draft boards have been widely criticized for a deferment policy that gives preference to students and the wealthy. So, on December 1st, 1969, the Selective Service holds its first draft lottery since World War II.
June 25th.
366 plastic balls, each marked with a different birth date, including February 29th, are drawn to determine a completely random draft order for men between the ages of 19 and 25.
July 4, 279.
Dashing through the snow, in one horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way.
The children have been the happiest I've seen them since Ben left. It actually even feels like Christmas this year.
Ann Purcell and her family are celebrating their first holiday since learning her husband, Ben, is among the approximately 400 known prisoners of war being held in North Vietnam.
Ever since we got the news about Ben, all the children think he'll be coming home soon. My daughter,
So
Debbie
was
is
just
convinced that we're going to
convinced
get a
that
letter
we were
at
going to
Christmas.
get a letter at Christmas. And she would go to the mailbox every day. It just broke my heart. I just wanted to cry. And I said, Debbie, you know, I hope we get mail, but I just don't want you to just be there every day and agonize over this. And I guess I agonized over it as much as she did. But she still went every day. And she was so disappointed that we didn't get one.
It breaks my heart to see her so disappointed. But even more, it makes me realize that I've actually got to do something. I can't just sit back and hope anymore. I've got to do whatever it takes to make my family whole again.
Cruising down these rivers, I'm surrounded by people who still live like they're in the Stone Age. You can almost forget that we're in the middle of a war zone. Although that's the best way to get yourself killed. Because out here, everything can change in a second, and you never see it coming.
Gary Benedetti and his crew have been patrolling in the Mekong Delta for the past 12 months. Their current assignment is to pick up a group of Navy SEALs who have come under attack by the Viet Cong. They're on board what's known as an Alpha boat, which is specifically designed to withstand underwater explosions.
The further we go, the narrower the river gets, to the point where it's less than 100 feet across. You're looking and expecting to get shot
at any time, and you can't see anything because all you can see is jungle. You can't see beyond the jungle because it's really thick. So you're kind of going down there, and you're wondering what happens.
Happening. You're expecting it at any time. Suddenly, we're taking sniper fire from the shoreline. Everybody opens up. You don't even know what the hell you're shooting. You just keep shooting. Over the radio, I hear the commander screaming, "Ceasefire! Ceasefire! This is Jester Alpha! Ceasefire!" When the smoke finally clears, we can see what we've hit. It's a little village, full of people, all dead. I can feel my blood start to boil. Because, the VC, they do this on purpose. They hide behind these people, and then they fire on us. Because they know we'll fire back. It's their way of making sure the civilians don't trust us. In a few more weeks, I'll be going home. When I do, I sure as hell hope the South Vietnamese can pick up the slack. Because judging from how these VC treat these people, God help them if they can't.
In Paris, peace talks between North and South Vietnam, the Viet Cong, and the United States are deadlocked. After nearly 2 years, almost all that has been agreed upon is the shape of the negotiating table. Hoping to speed up the process, National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger begins secret meetings with North Vietnamese negotiator Le Duc Tho. Meanwhile, Nixon's Vietnamization program is being slowly but steadily implemented. Throughout the country, U.S. troops are handing over equipment, bases, and years of military knowledge to the South Vietnamese.
It's going to be a shambles. There are good ARVNs, don't get me wrong, there are some really crack outfits, but the rest of them, I don't want any part of it. It's going to be bad. Can't get the support now. What's it going to be like when there's less and less of us?
As it becomes clear that America's goal is no longer full-fledged military victory, but instead an honorable exit from Vietnam, the morale of troops is affected.
This stuff smells pretty strong. It is. It's really nice stuff over here.
And you empty it out and you stick the bowl in the barrel, blow into the bowl, and when it comes out, you get really stoned.
I picked a hell of a time to come back to this country. Although the main reason I did is because I'm dying for a chance to command a battalion.
Lieutenant Colonel James Anderson is an aide to General Creighton Abrams, the overall U.S. military commander in Vietnam. 7 years after serving as an advisor to the ARVN, Anderson now prepares to take command of a troubled American battalion.
General Abrams turned to me one night at the dinner table and he said, Jim, he said, why don't you take command of that battalion? It was almost as though to say, okay, wise guy, you seem to have all the answers. Won't you go show me? And I said, I'd love to take command of that battalion.
Anderson will soon discover just how important unifying his men is.
The door to battalion headquarters opens, and in walk a bunch of generals. They swear me to secrecy and get right to the point. How long before you can be prepared to make a combat assault into Cambodia?
And I said, are we talking about in terms of hours, days, weeks, months? And they said, we're talking about hours.
For years, the North Vietnamese have used neighboring Cambodia as a refuge. Much of the Ho Chi Minh Trail runs through the country, and large stores of enemy weapons and supplies are hidden along the border. But since the start of hostilities, U.S. policy has prohibited its ground troops from entering the country for risk of widening the war. In early 1970, however, President Nixon sees a window of opportunity when the Cambodian leader Norodom Sihanouk is ousted by the pro-American general Lon Nol. Despite the political risk, Nixon decides a chance at destroying the NVA's capacity to launch assaults into South Vietnam is worth the gamble, and so he issues top-secret orders, sending U.S. troops into Cambodia.
It's like a shot of adrenaline, straight into my veins. Within hours, hundreds of soldiers are assembling. Massive amounts of ammo and supplies are being flown in and distributed. No one can contain their excitement. We've been waiting a long time for this. A chance to cross that forbidden line and see what's on the other side. We're finally going into Cambodia. I haven't slept in almost 24 hours. and yet I feel more awake now than I ever have in my life.
Lieutenant Colonel James Anderson is leading his battalion from the 1st Air Cavalry into Cambodia. Ahead of them stretch waves of tactical fighters and B-52 bombers, while below race mile-long columns of mechanized infantry and armor. Altogether, 30,000 U.S. troops are poised for action. Their mission is twofold. First, decimate enemy sanctuaries and disrupt NVA supply lines along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And second, attempt to find and destroy the Communist Military Command Center known as Kasvin, which is rumored to be located in the Fishhook region.
As soon as we hit the ground and get organized, we move out. I don't intend to waste any time finding what the enemy has been hiding.
Roger, we just come up on a trotter here. Leads into a small village. Don't seem like there's any movement in there.
It doesn't take long. Within 2 hours, we come across a massive enemy training and supply dump.
Bottom port, start coming this way, up.
Right away, the guys start calling it the city, because it has almost everything you could imagine that you would have in a city.
That you would have in a city any place else. So you had schools, you had hospitals, you had ammunition storage areas. I don't know how many tons, hundreds of tons of rice that were in there. I was shocked that they had it, that it was that large and it was that close to the border. I don't think we were more than
7 miles into Cambodia. So if there's that much here, I can only imagine how much is out there. There's so many supplies, it'll take months to destroy it all. And the last thing I want to do is get so hung up with this that we fail our primary objective. So I order 2 of my rifle companies to stay back at the city and oversee its destruction, while I take the other 3 companies and head out to find the NVA headquarters.
While Anderson and his men speed towards their objective, President Nixon prepares to deal with the political problem, the uproar that the news will surely provoke. He decides to take the offensive so he can frame the issue before others do.
Tonight, American and South Vietnamese units will attack the headquarters for the entire communist military operation in South Vietnam. This is not an invasion of Cambodia. The areas in which these attacks will be launched are completely occupied and controlled by North Vietnamese forces. We take this action not for the purpose of expanding the war into Cambodia, but for the purpose of ending the war in Vietnam and winning the just peace we all desire.
The day after Nixon's announcement, student protests break out on dozens of campuses across the country. On May 4th, 2,000 students rally at Kent State. As the demonstration erupts into violence, members of the Ohio National Guard suddenly open fire on the crowd of students. In 13 seconds, 67 live rounds are fired. 4 students are killed. 8 more are wounded. 1 permanently paralyzed. Public reaction is horrified and widespread. 4 million students go on strike, forcing 450 colleges, universities, and high schools to shut down.
Ever since I came back from Vietnam, I've been trying to push this war out of my mind. But seeing this makes me realize I can't keep quiet anymore.
2 years earlier, Barry Romo returned home from Vietnam with the body of his nephew, Robert, who was killed in action after the Tet Offensive.
I can't lie to myself anymore because this war isn't ending. So I grab a buddy of mine who served with me over there, and we put on
our fatigues that we had worn in Vietnam, and we still had them, and they still fit. And we went to the anti-draft rally.
And as I'm looking around at all those faces of those kids, all the frustration and the anger and the loss that I've been feeling boils up inside of me. I don't care what the hell anyone thinks or what anyone says. This has got to end. This has got to end now. So I jump up and I start telling all these kids that if they're brave enough to burn their draft cards and risk going to jail, well, then I support them. Because I've had enough fighting, enough killing, and enough of this war. It felt liberating. I felt like someone had taken
10,000 tons off my shoulder. I no longer was bearing the burden of Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson's sins. That I was taking a good stand and a manly stand and
a human stand and a purposeful stand.
With the country tearing itself apart, President Nixon issues a directive curtailing the scope and length of the mission in Cambodia. He pledges that U.S. forces will advance no further than 19 miles into the country and sets June 30th as the date all American troops will return to South Vietnam.
According to our intelligence, we're less than 3 miles from the North Vietnamese headquarters. Meaning, we'll be there before nightfall. But just as we're closing in on our objective, I get a call from division headquarters telling me to halt in place. Do not go any further. Don't go any further. Doesn't make any sense to me tactically.
And I was pretty upset about it. I called and I said, who in the hell is making this kind of dumb decision? You know, I'm within 5 kilometers of my objective, and we can be there by nightfall. I said, what's going on? And, well, finally, the division commander got on the phone and said, Anderson, shut up and listen. Your orders are halt in place. Don't go any further. I found out later that President Nixon reported to the American people that our objectives in Cambodia were limited.
I'm absolutely speechless. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like we were finally using some common sense in this war. Now, I'm not sure what the hell we're doing. The only thing more frustrating than knowing the enemy's withdrawn beyond our reach again is knowing that our time in Cambodia is up. So there's absolutely no chance we'll accomplish anything else here.
At the end of June 1970, after 8 weeks of operations, the 30,000 U.S. ground troops prepare to leave Cambodia. Although the 19-mile restriction prevented U.S. forces from locating the NVA headquarters, they did confiscate or destroy 20,000 enemy weapons, over 7,000 tons of rice, and nearly 2,000 tons of ammunition, the largest enemy supply cache destroyed to date. But for soldiers such as James Anderson, the moment is bittersweet.
What really gets to me is how much time it must have taken the enemy to accumulate all these weapons and ammo.
And the fact that they were making this effort to bring all of this stuff down. I mean, they were preparing for a major invasion into South Vietnam. And it was just clear as could be.
As could be, right here.
Right there.
There's so much rice and food stuff. We can't haul it all away, or even burn it. I guarantee you, the NVA will rebuild their supplies, and the second we're out of Vietnam, they'll launch their major invasion. We may have bought a little time, but I'm afraid that's all we've done.
Every day I see another wife welcome her husband back from Vietnam. I'm so happy for them. But at the same time, nobody's doing a thing to help bring Ben home. And I'm through waiting.
In the summer of 1970, Ann Purcell becomes a founding member of the National League of Families, an organization with only one mission: to obtain the release of all prisoners, a full accounting of the missing, and the return of all recoverable remains of those killed in Vietnam.
We set up bamboo cages so people can see what our men are held in, and organize petitions and letter campaigns. By doing all these things, it helps to get the word out
about our POWs, especially to people that were not directly involved in the war. It made people realize that there is a human being that's out there that we need to think about and pray about, that's been fighting for our freedom.
But as 1970 slips into 1971, peace talks continue to stall, while America's withdrawal from Vietnam accelerates.
Over the past 10 years, presidents of the United States have come before the American people in times of crisis to talk about war, the threat of war. Today, I am able to talk to you in a more hopeful and positive vein about how we are moving this nation and the world toward a lasting peace. We have kept our commitments as we have taken out our troops. South Vietnam now has an excellent opportunity not only to survive, but to build a strong, free society. We are at a critical moment in history. What America does or fails to do will determine whether peace and freedom can be won in the coming generation. That is why the way in which we end this conflict is so crucial to our efforts to build a lasting peace in coming decades. The right way out of Vietnam is crucial to our changing role in the world.